So how would I change the weapons in Stalker 2 for veteran mode? Like, what are things I would do to them? So we have different categories. We have buff base stats. We have buff upgrades. So buff upgrades means that if there are upgrade trees in the weapons upgrade menu through the armorers or technicians, you can buff those upgrades so that the base stats are still maybe bad, but then with upgrades it can become better, maybe a little bit more competitive. No changes is just leave it alone. Rework is rework the weapon. You know, maybe it has like something that's just like functionally weird or broken or strange. And then nerf is, you know, reduce the weapon's effectiveness. Now, I don't know that anything's going to be, I would recommend anything get nerfed, but I guess we'll see when we come to all the weapons. So for the first weapon, the AK-74S, I think this should have upgrades buffed. I don't think its base stats should be changed because it is a starter weapon, but I think it should have its, like, the upgrades be buffed so that maybe it's like a B tier type weapon in Endgame instead of like a D or C tier. Like, it's almost unusable because of its low damage and its low penetration stats. Same thing for the 74U and the the AR-416 or whatever they call it, and the M16. I think all of these need upgrade buffs. You could argue they need base stat buffs as well, but you get them so early that I think if you buffed the base stats, it would kind of make them weird. So let's see what else. The APS-B. I would. Does it need buffed? Honestly, no changes. I feel like it's fine where it's at. It has really good damage output, but it burns through durability quickly. So there's like a big trade-off there. It has really good base stats, pretty good upgrades. There's really nothing bad about it. I would leave it as is. Let's see. Is this the Lavina? One's the Val or whatever. The other one's the Lavina. This one I think has the low base damage of 20. I might say like buff its base stats. It shoots. So weirdly, it shares ammo with the revolver, and I think technically the revolver is shooting non-revolver rounds, or maybe this is shooting revolver rounds. I don't know, like the technical difference between the ammo on this because I haven't really looked into it. But I would buff the base stats so it has higher base damage. I think that's fair. And then from there, it could probably also do with like some benefit or do with some upgrade buffs as well. But I would buff its base stats. For the boomstick, rework maybe? What would we rework it to? It's just, all right, so this is like a starter weapon. I guess make the upgrades a little bit better and then just leave it at that. I think that's fine. For the bouquet. The bouquet, a lot of people really like this thing. I would rework it so that it can be used in the small slot, like in the SM or in the pistol slot. That's it. I think that would be interesting, and I would leave it alone aside from that. I think that would make it a lot better, and it would make it a kind of in between, like it would be in between the Rhino and the APS-B. It'd have more durability than both, but less damage potential. So it'd be kind of like a third option for endgame. I think that would be very interesting for it. Knee Pro, buff the base stats. I want this thing one-tapping exosuits with the 7.62 upgrade with at least armor-piercing rounds. 2-tapping with base ammo, I think, is fine. 1-tapping with armor-piercing rounds, I think, needs to be a thing. You only get that upgrade in endgame. This weapon can be not like super expensive to upgrade, but in order to get to that upgrade, you have to like, you know, pay into it and also get the blueprints, which is in Pripyat. So I feel like that would be fine. I would buff its base damage a little bit and the damage on the damage conversion so that it can 1-tap with armor-piercing, but not with base ammo. The P37 or the G36C, or just G36, I believe. I'm fine with buffing its base stats a little bit. Now, I don't want it one-tapping exosuits because it has all these upgrades. I feel like its upgrades are fine. It just needs a little bit more base penetration and base damage. Now, I think it should still take like a few headshots to kill because it has the Holemaker. It should still be worse than the Karad, but I think it needs a base buff. Same thing with the Fora. I feel like these two are just kind of like, they're fine to use in the middle game. That's really where you would use them. But I feel for, well, let's do this. Let's leave their stats alone and let's make their upgrades better. Maybe more damage through upgrades, maybe more penetration through upgrades. Some of the penetration upgrades, like getting 25% additional penetration when the penetration stat is low, is not enough to push the weapon into being that much better. So I feel like the penetration upgrades need to be more meaningful. But aside from that, I would do buff the upgrades. The Vector, this thing's weird because technically it's considered to be like an endgame weapon by like, you know, by virtue of what the exosuit enemies are running. They run like, and same thing with the bucket. Like they have buckets, they have APSB secondaries typically, they have Vector primary, M701, Gauss's, Rams, Saigas, LMGs, occasionally SPSAs, Karads, Nepros. That's typically, oh yeah, and then of course the SVU and stuff like this. So those are, and the Bison. Those are like the main things they tend to have. I kind of don't really know what I would change about it. I feel like it's fine. I would maybe buff its durability. I think that's its big issue. Maybe give it a slight buff to durability. Not even like a lot. Like I think it's like 1,000 shots until it breaks. Maybe like 1,200 or 1,400, something like that. Like a durability buff. The Gauss. I feel like the Gauss. I don't know how to feel about this because it just one shots every mutant, and it's kind of just like super brain dead. It's just like in a one, like it's so easy to use, but it is supposed to be endgame only, so maybe no changes. The Grom, I would buff the upgrades. I feel like it's just missing a lot. The Gordon, I would buff the upgrades as well. So the upgrades I want, like maybe better penetration upgrades so that you can use it. Like, I don't want it to be competitive with the endgame weapons. I just want it to be a little bit better so that if you like the weapon, you can still use it and you're not, like, mag dumping to kill a single exosuit. I feel like that's fine. Like, still make them worse than the better weapons, but not, you know, this much worse. So upgrading to continue using them. Same thing with the M860. I feel like it just needs better upgrades in order to be good. Its range is super limiting. I feel like it's just worse. It's almost like it's worse than the Holemaker. Now it has better range and spread than the Holemaker, but the Holemaker is semi-auto and reloads an entire magazine, so I don't really think it's that good in endgame, if at all. So maybe better upgrades, so the upgrades can keep it relevant for longer if you like it. So I'm not recommending that they buff these to the point where they're better than endgame weapons or even competitive. Just still worse, but not as worse. And that way you can buy, like you can invest in these weapons and then they're like still usable in endgame, but just not optimal or even close to optimal. The Mark 1, it needs a lot. It doesn't one-tap exos beyond like basic starter exosuits. So like if you're not killing starter exosuits, it basically just, you know, 2-taps everything. But basic enemies... So here's the problems with this gun. Close that. It has 450 shots until it breaks, but it does not one-tap endgame exosuits. And arguably this is an endgame weapon. It shoots 308 rounds, which are expensive and hard to get. What else does it do? It has pretty good range. Its penetration is only 2, and its damage is like 55. So it doesn't have any damage increase, and its penetration increase gets it to like 2.5. Penetration value, which is decent, but it's not that competitive for like a 308 shooting weapon compared to the M701 Super, which is firing the exact same cartridge. It's just not the high damage DMR it should be. I feel like it needs base damage increase, a little bit of a durability increase, and a weapon health increase so that it can one-tap exosuits with at least armor-piercing rounds at all stages. So I would have it do that, and also I would increase its health and like it's the gun health. It's at 1,500 gun health. Gun health is how much damage you can take from anomalies and like melee attacks and like grenade spam and stuff like this. So like that contributes to durability. So like as you're shooting it, you have 450 shots / 1,500 health, not plus 1,500 health. So it needs better weapon health, needs better base damage. Honestly, it should probably one-tap exosuits with base ammo when upgraded. I feel like that's reasonable because 308 ammo is not the easiest to get, and it's also not the cheapest ammo. So it's not common and it's expensive compared to other options. So it needs a lot of buffs. This is large, like this is basically an endgame weapon. Enemies do carry this in endgame, and I think it just needs base stat buffs, then it's fine. The PTM, or in other words, the skiff pistol. See, I don't know how to feel about this, because it's like on one end, how do I feel about quest items? Honestly, let's do this. I don't like how you're forced to carry this and how it's identical to this. I would rework it so that you're not forced to carry this, and it's just like implied he always has a pistol on him that, you know, may or may not be in the inventory. I don't think it needs to matter. I don't think it matters that it's in your inventory. Like, we can just assume, like, as a player, it's like, oh, he just has a pistol with him. It's like, I got it. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be like a forced carry. I would rework both of these so that maybe this is worse than this, and if you upgrade this, it becomes better, and then this is not a forced carry. That's my take on this, so I don't know. Karad, honestly, I think it's fine. The RPG, I think it's still bad. I think it does more damage now. Someone says they buffed its damage against mutants, so maybe it's fine. So I'll just put this in no changes for now until I test it and evaluate it. The Rhino, does this need buffed? Probably not. I would like to see it have an increase in durability. Maybe slight increase in durability on the Rhino and APS-B and the M701 Super, but aside from that, they could leave it alone. It'd be fine. The Ram, honestly, I think it's fine. The LMG, maybe some buffs, slight buffs to upgrades. That's the only thing I'd really change on it. Saiga, I would leave alone. SPSA, some upgrade buffs, nothing crazy though. SVD, same thing. SVU, I would just buff its base durability and then leave it alone, and then fix the upgrade for the armor penetration because it can't be added. It's like bugged right now. The TOZ, I would, similar boomstick, give it better upgrades. So if you want to use it, you can just for fun. All right, this weapon, the UDP, this needs base buffs. This should have higher damage than Skiff's pistol. I would put this at like 40 base damage and 2 penetration minimum, and then give it some good upgrades so that it's like still worse than like an APS-B, but at least not nearly as bad. For the MP5, what would I do with the MP5? We go the upgrade routes. Yeah, I guess that's fine. It's an early game SMG. Maybe make the upgrades a little bit better, but not too good. And then for the Bison, I would leave that alone. It's pretty insane. And for the, I think this is the Vintar, right? The Levina is the one without the scope. Vintar is the one with the scope and this like stock. So this has 35 base damage. I would buff its base stats, make it a little bit more competitive with other options. My big problem with this gun is that there are other semi-automatic things that can do similar damage and have similar breakpoints. The Nipro comes to mind. So what else? The SVD, SVU are kind of similar in that way. They have high base damage. The Mark 1, very similar. Clusterfuck, things like this have like pretty high base damage. I think it like lacks good penetration, and it can't one-tap anything on veteran mode. So I don't think anything really needs nerfed, so I don't really need this category. I guess we can change this to not sure what to do with it. But here's where I think the guns are in terms of like what they need. Most of the like early game stuff and some of these other weapons, I would just make it so their upgrades are better. Like the TOZ and the boomstick upgrades are just like really they're really bad. Like a lot of the recoil decreases when you shoot 2 shots. It doesn't matter at all. I would rather it be like range or penetration, or maybe even buff the base damage a little bit so that you can still kind of use them. Now, should you be able to take a boomstick into endgame? Maybe, maybe not, but at least buff the upgrades so that these weapons can be relevant for longer, so that if you do decide to upgrade them, you can run them throughout more of the middle game before dropping them. I think that would be more interesting. And then all the things I put in, like buff the base stats. Honestly, I'd buff the Vector's base damage to 20. I think that would be fine. Because compared to the Bison, it's basically just outclassed because this has significantly higher penetration. I think it has similar range. I think they both can hit 3 range, but this just has higher capacity, better penetration, or similar penetration and much higher base damage. And this thing just shoots so fast that I feel like it's just shooting weak bullets that don't really do a ton, and it like burns through its mags quickly, so you don't really get a ton of kills per clip, whereas with this you can get a ton. You get 65 round magazine and just like go to town. And it's super cost efficient too. They kind of both are, but this is just clearly so much better. This needs to be brought up if this is considered endgame. If it's considered middle game, I don't know. I still think it needs a base buff. And Knee Pro I'd buff. These are the ones I'd buff. Then these are the ones I'd buff the upgrades. And a lot of them are no changes, which is pretty good. And then rework just to make the bouquet usable in the pistol slot. And then I would rework the PTM and Skiff's pistol so that, you know, maybe this isn't a forced carry item, and make this a little bit worse than this if you upgrade it. Like, have upgrades on the normal PTM, because like, what's the point of this gun to pick up if Skiff's pistol is literally identical to it in every way, but just weighs less? So it's just a better version of this. So I feel like that's stupid. And then the UDP obviously needs buffed as well. It's just pretty bad. And the rest of it, I think just upgrades are fine. Let me know what you think about these. If you would like make any changes, maybe move some of these into buff upgrades, or maybe even nerf. Let me know what you would nerf. I'm curious to see what people would say if you would nerf anything. I don't think anything's really overpowered right now. You could argue maybe the Saiga is a little bit. Maybe like a slight damage nerf on the Saiga, so that it doesn't one-shot headshot as easily with buckshot. That'll probably make some people upset that I'm arguing to nerf the Saiga, but I feel like if anything, if I had to choose weapons that would probably need nerfs, slight damage nerf on this, slight damage nerf on this because it has insane capacity. What else? I think this is fine because it doesn't really like 2-tap. I wouldn't touch this because it's a revolver. These have fire rate concerns. I think this is fine. Maybe a slight damage nerf on this. I'd put its damage at like 130 instead of 140. Maybe 125, depending on how the breakpoints work out. So that way the RAM is like the superior like buckshot thing. This can still one-shot headshot with slugs, and it still retains its fast fire rate, but then this has more damage per shot with a slower fire rate, better durability, to kind of differentiate the weapons a little bit more. I would buff this thing's damage and nerf this thing's damage. So then this becomes your kind of like marksman SMG, and then this becomes your spam SMG. I feel like that would be fine. It's kind of dumb how powerful this is, actually. And then this one-shotting every single like mutant, except for like the heavies. I feel like it should do like 350 base damage. Two-shotting, you know, most mutants. I think it still one-shots a lot of them, but two-shotting most mutants is fine. Make sure all mutants have a headshot multiplier. I think you should have to headshot to one-shot like poltergeists. Though you can't see the poltergeist head, but for like deer, you should have to one-shot headshot them. Bloodsuckers even. Like if it had 350 base, you body shot a bloodsucker, it has 400 health, it's almost dead. So you could just clean it up with something. I feel like this is a little bit too overpowered. Anything else that is too overpowered? Not really. I feel like this is balanced by its fire rate. This is balanced by its fire rate. This is balanced by its fire rate and reload. This is balanced by its durability. This is balanced by its primary fire being worse than the Knee Pro, which has like basically identical durability, but it has under barrels that can be kind of awkward to change to if you're not used to it. So I feel like these are actually in a good spot right now. If I had to nerf anything, I would nerf those slightly. So yeah, that's it for this one. Definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this or found this interesting. Let me know what you think about what you would move things or what you would buff. Maybe you buff base stats of like the AR because people love that gun. Or maybe make a variant of it that has like higher damage or something. But yeah, peace.